never has there been a more exciting time to be alive.
Hey, it's time to go back to the 80s to relive some classic TV goofs, our favorite shows. The Greatest American Hero ran from 1981 to 1983. It starred William Catt and Robert Culp. In case you missed the show the first time around, Ralph Hanley is a school teacher who is given a costume from aliens that give him superpowers. He teams up with Bill Maxwell, an FBI agent. Think of it kind of like I Spy meets Superman if Superman didn't know how to use his powers very well. Or at all in some cases. In the Season 2 episode Hog Wild, a motorcycle gang has taken over a small town and smashed up a local gas station. You can see junk is everywhere before Ralph flies by, but once he does fly by, it's almost like the gang decided to clean up their mess. And typically motorcycle gangs don't rampage and destroy and then clean up their mess before they leave. In the Season 2 episode Plague, when Ralph catches up to Bill after he's been thrown from a helicopter, you can see that Ralph's cape is actually a parachute. You can even see a mini chute that activates the main chute attached to Ralph's right leg. Don't get me wrong, I think this was a very unique way to simulate flying for a superhero, and definitely risky compared to using CGI or wires. But it's still interesting to see a superhero who flies wearing a parachute. There's a couple times on this episode that Ralph doesn't look quite like Ralph. Who's this guy? Okay, unless I'm really losing my mind, that's not Ralph Hinkley. I mean, I'm the TV crazy man, but that's because I'm crazy about television. In the Season 3 episode Live at 11, as Ralph takes off, you can see a trampoline springboard pop up from behind the bushes.
I see you're Ralph Hunkley.
Hinkley, actually. I'm sorry to see you retiring.
That's very kind of you, Mr. Hickle.
It's no wonder people had trouble with Ralph's name, because after the assassination attempt of the 80s greatest icon, Ronald Reagan, by John Hinkley, the show actually changed the character's name to Ralph Hanley for the remainder of the first season after that event occurred.
Mr. Handel, Rhonda's teacher.
Mr. Hanley.
You know, amazingly, I didn't notice this as a kid. Of course, they tried to sort of brush over the fact, for instance, by having his students refer to him as just Mr. H. And then they went back to Hinkley after the start of the second season. The incident, of course, put the show's creators in a really bad spot. On one hand, it seems like you should be able to trust your audience to know your character is fictional and has no ties to the Hinkley in the news. But on the other hand, it was a situation of historic proportions, and there hadn't been any other TV show in history in a similar boat. So I'm sure it was a puzzler on how to handle it. I think I would have just skipped mentioning his last name until the next season entirely. But then again, what about the millions of Americans who have the last name Hinkley? What were they supposed to do? Change their last name? In this video, we look at some goofs from the most popular show of the 1980s, the A-Team. It might drive you a little crazy.
You driving me crazy!
This TV Crazy Man here, talking about another show and some more goofs. On the episode Taxicab Wars, B.A., aka Mr. T, is trying to get an older couple to ride in his cab, but a bad guy from a rival cab company tries to trick the older couple into believing B.A.'s cab is not in service. Mr. T gets ticked and starts throwing bad guys around like rag dolls. The crazy thing happens though, really quickly. Notice the older couple are clearly standing outside the cab. Mr. T has not put them in the cab yet, but then there's the older lady inside the cab, and then she's outside again. Whoa! I mean, it's like a total time jump. Invasion of the Twilight Zone on the A-Team? Or is this a tie-in to Ripley's Believe It or Not? You be the judge. In Season 1, in the episode A Nice Place to Visit, during the opening chase sequence, we hear Hannibal say, "Step on it, B.A." Interior van shots indicate that Mr. T is driving. However, shots from outside the van show that someone else is driving who isn't wearing a beard. And on top of that, B.A. seems to keep changing clothes. Could it be the A-Team is so tough that they can change drivers while changing clothes in the middle of a high-speed chase? Okay, in the second season episode Recipe for Heavy Bread, there's 3 different goofs that I want to talk about. And in the scene where the team is escaping with Lynn from a bakery, Murdoch is on the A-Team van, and he's shooting at tires of approaching bad guys. When the black car's tires explode, a filming crew member jumps out behind a stack of crates located at the lower right of the picture. Okay, there's another scene in that episode when they're tailing bad guys. Hannibal removes his coat and tie. As the van makes a right turn, Hannibal is still wearing his coat and tie.
I ain't going anywhere with him, Hannibal.
Now talk about the Mandela effect. I distinctly remember Dirk Benedict as playing Face from day one. But in the very first pilot episode of the A-Team, another Face is seen, played by Tim Dunnigan. Apparently in the real world, they thought Tim was too young or too tall to fit in with the rest of the gang. But for those that did notice, it must have seemed like a pretty strange occurrence to change actors right off the bat like that. Now on a side note, if you wonder what this particular scene is about, Dirk Benedict had just gotten off of a famous role in Battlestar Galactica, thus the Cylons on the A-Team intro. In the episode, there's always a catch. The A-Team runs out of a hospital to escape Colonel Decker. B.A., aka Mr. T, has a foot injury. Mr. T is clearly wearing a green shirt, but as the A-Team van is running down the road seconds later, B.A. has a pink shirt on. What the heck is going on here? Did B.A. decide he was bored with the green shirt in the middle of a high-speed chase? And let me be clear, I'm not making fun of Mr. T for wearing a pink shirt. No man would still be alive and ever mock Mr. T. Well, I mean, in the 80s, pink was a big thing. Pastels were cool. I mean, just look at Don Johnson. And he was a tough guy, too. Okay, in the episode Steel, when the denim construction car is airborne, the word denim disappears from the side of the car. But when the car stops and comes back to a rest, it's back on again. It's like magic. Well, thanks to slow motion, we can see that the denim is just a sticker and it really just peels off during the stunt. So I guess they decided to put it back on when the car had stopped. Now on the episode Bad Time on the Border, B.A.'s hair grows several inches from the beginning of the episode towards the middle and the end of the episode. It's just weird. I mean, how fast does his hair grow?
What in the name of heaven is going on?
Hey, in this video, we're going to take a very close look at the pilot episode of Knight Rider with lots of goofs and a bit of trivia you may not have known before. Like, who is that guy driving the car? And what is that coming out of Kit's gas tank? Before we get started though, let me just say, I love Knight Rider. I loved it growing up and I still do. It's probably why I bought my black 95 Trans Am. Yeah, the year's not the same, but I feel like it's just a modified version of Kit.
Good heavens, and I thought Michael was difficult.
I'm still waiting for it to talk to me though.
We aren't speaking.
In the demolition scene, a kid hitches a ride with Michael Knight after it's too late to drop the kid off because they're right in the middle of the action. You know?
What are you doing here? You're supposed to be with your mother.
This is much more fun.
What is this? Look at this.
So you can spot a stunt driver who is definitely not Michael Knight with a dummy replacing the kid riding alongside Michael Knight here. Notice that the kid is definitely shorter than Michael here, but his dummy replacement is just as tall as Michael is. Also in this scene, you can see what appears to be ramps enabling Kit to pop up on two wheels. If you look really closely, that is. On a trivia note, that's Charles Napier. He was the second voice of the Hulk, and he popped up on a lot of shows in the 70s and 80s, you know, like BJ and the Bear. I did a whole video on him Hulk fans might be interested in checking out. On a pilot episode, Michael is always talking to his boss Devin on a payphone, when future episodes show him talking to Devin inside Kit. In fact, he speaks to Devin inside Kit toward the end of this episode. Apparently nobody told him he could do that. You'd think Kit would have mentioned it. Now in the pilot, there's a super fun scene where two car thieves trying to steal Kit, and they manage to actually do that when Michael leaves the door open accidentally. Notice when Kit is spinning out, when he's got the two thieves in the car, something is coming out of the gas tank. I have to wonder if it was actually pretty lucky the car didn't explode in real life. This next goof, you really have to look really closely. As Kit pulls in, look at the bottom of the screen, and you can see somebody is driving the car. Only on Knight Rider would it freak me out seeing somebody driving a car when there's not supposed to be anybody in there. Now keep looking really close at the bottom. You can see his hand slowly go down at the very end. Now in the big finale, there's a pretty awesome scene where Kit jumps a big rig driven by Red West, who was Elvis Presley's bodyguard and close friend. West would end up not only being an actor, but also a successful songwriter in his lifetime. Well, when Kit jumps over Red's big rig, take a good look at the bottom of the car and compare it to this derby scene earlier in the show. Looks a little too much like the bottom of a plastic toy. It's too smooth and there's no detail of what should be underneath the car. I never noticed that when I was a kid though. Now one of the bad guys in the helicopter here is Lance Legall, the same guy that liked to chase the A-Team from time to time. He also had a thing for helicopters as he did some narration work on Airwolf, the show about the super advanced helicopter. By the way, if you didn't know it, the 80s was a time for super advanced everything. Besides Airwolf, there was the advanced helicopter Blue Thunder, super advanced motorcycle Street Hawk, which was like a motorcycle version of Knight Rider, except the motorcycle didn't talk. And then of course there was Automan, who was a computer-generated superhero. Now backtracking just a little bit, Knight Rider was very similar to the 6 Million Armed Man in that the hero almost dies at the beginning and he gets sent to doctors to get rebuilt. Well, in Michael Knight's case, of course, his face is what gets rebuilt, completely revamped, so the crooks can't recognize him. The interesting thing is that the actor who played Steve Austin's boss on the 6 Million Armed Man, the one who proclaims we can rebuild him, is also the doctor who fixes up Michael Knight in the very first episode. Too bad he didn't stick around for more episodes. Another quinky dink is that Richard Anderson, Oscar, played a character named Sam Knight the year before on an episode of Charlie's Angels. It's things like that that just make you go, Now here's another goof that could easily slip by you if you weren't paying close attention. Towards the end of the episode, Michael Knight gets shot in the shoulder, but the funny thing is the crazy wound seems to move from one side to the other. I don't know, maybe Michael forgot which shoulder he got hit in.
Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno are the Incredible Hulk in The Incredible Hulk Returns.
Now in this scene from the TV reunion movie, The Incredible Hulk Returns, it's clear that it's a stuntman and not Lou, who is probably cut even better for this movie than he was in the original TV show. In the TV movie, The Trial of the Incredible Hulk in 1989, Bill Bixby, David Banner, has a beard, but when he becomes the Hulk is clean shaven. Also, during the dream sequence courthouse transformation, he's about 90 to 100% hulked out, and yet when you look at his hand has still got a lot of pink around it. While we're on the subject of superheroes, let's look at Superman 4, which technically wasn't a TV show, but it came out in the 80s, and boy did it have a lot of goofs. The problem with this scene is that his cape shouldn't be flapping because he's in outer space, so there's no wind to blow his cape around. And the other thing is that they use this same exact flying sequence a lot in the movie. Now it's my understanding without air it's impossible for sound to travel in space, so would Superman be able to speak to the cosmonaut? Maybe that's why he looks so surprised.
Clark, things aren't that bad, Clark!
Superman needs to confide in Lois, but since he wiped away his secret identity from her memory in the second movie, he has to remind her.
Stop! Clark!
But why does he do it the hard way, by walking off a building and risking Lois having a heart attack? She was a smoker after all. Or maybe I'm just nitpicking in this case.
The dude of steel. Boy, are you gonna get it?
In the first two Superman movies, Lex Luthor wears a wig because he's completely bald. In this film, it appears Lex just has a bald spot.
Silly me, thinking I could fool a super guy.
Unless he's wearing a hairpiece with a bald spot.
You're right.
One of the biggest goofs was made on the part of Cannon, who forced Christopher Reeve and the film team to cut the movie's time down significantly in order to get more playtime in theaters. A few action scenes were gone that might have made the movie a bit more fun, like Superman's fight with the first nuclear man. In the Wall of China scene, Superman gets a brand new power, which seems awfully convenient. Superman doesn't normally have the power to move things with his mind or by looking at it. Normally, you imagine Superman reconstructing a structure using his hands and super speed. Of course, there was this in Superman 2 showing a Phantom Zone villain doing the levitation thing with his finger, but two wrongs don't make a right. Now just imagine if Superman used this eye power on every problem. The movie would only last about 10 minutes. In this fight scene between Superman and Nuclear Man, we are supposed to be in a huge city. But here in this shot, you can clearly see that this building is definitely not tall enough to be in downtown Metropolis. Again, this was due to Ken cutting back the time for editing and cutting the budget in half. And here's another instance where Superman is using that eyeball power again. When the fire hydrant explodes, it looks like cheap styrofoam. It's impossible for Nuclear Man or Superman to hold up the entire Statue of Liberty by one end like they're showing here. That part of the statue was not built to support the weight of the entire structure. That section would crumble in their hands if they applied the amount of strength necessary to move the statue around in the air. In this scene where Nuclear Man and Superman are fighting in outer space, in this one shot it looks like they're standing on solid ground versus actually flying and fighting in the air. In this scene, there's a long white string stretching over the top of the hood of the cab to the sign. Must have been for the special effect, I assume, but I have no idea what role this string played.
Destroy Superman.
So towards the end of the picture, Nuclear Man kidnaps Lacey from the Daily Planet and flies her into outer space. Meanwhile, Superman gets the brilliant idea of moving the moon in front of the sun to block Nuclear Man's powers. So okay, there's two problems with this. One, if Superman pushes hard enough to push the moon in front of the sun, he would probably push through it like a bullet instead of, well, actually pushing the moon. Second, if he was able to push the moon in front of the sun, moving the moon like that would probably cause a lot of tidal waves and all kinds of chaos on planet Earth that he'd have to solve later.
Effective immediately, I'm going to rid our planet of all nuclear weapons.
Well, that is one way of doing it. Well, even if Superman's plan works, Lacey should not be alive at this point. She's in the middle of outer space without a spacesuit, and I can't even think of all the ways that she should be dead by now. You know, their hair shouldn't be blowing around, as there is no air in space. There is such a thing as solar wind, which is a continual stream of protons and electrons from the sun. According to what I read, it would barely ruffle your hair. The Daily Planet is supposed to be an American newspaper, and yet they use the spelling of favorite that is used in the UK and not the spelling that is used in America.
Trust me, I know what I'm doing.
Sledge Hammer debuted in 1986. It was a parody of cop movies at the time, and was basically a comedic clone of Dirty Harry. Hammer was possibly the toughest, roughest, baddest, manliest man to ever air on television. Not counting Mr. T and Chuck Norris, of course. Sledge was almost canceled on his first season, but when he accidentally blew up the entire city, he got high enough ratings that ABC gave him another season. It was a really cool episode. They used a shot that looked like it came from the Planet of the Apes at the end. I'm pretty sure it did. The weird thing they did, which I have to admit disappointed me as a kid, is they started the series in the second season, supposedly 5 years before Hammer's bomb mishap, and they just went on like nothing happened. Even Dory was still there, even though she only knew Hammer a year. I guess I was really hoping for something really creative and mind-boggling, like Hammer using time travel to put the world back to the way it was before. I mean, I know that would have completely changed the series a bit, but to completely ignore the whole bomb thing, well, was just really disappointing. Yeah, I have to say that Sledge Hammer blowing up the entire city and pretending like it didn't happen in the next season was the 80s biggest goof. At least the biggest goof for Sledge Hammer.
A typical donut is nothing but dough and sugar fried in fat, am I right?
Now that fat gums up your arteries and goes to your brain, and you turn liberal.
The Dukes of Hazzard was one of the biggest hits of the early 1980s. It debuted in 1979 but ran until 1985. So we'll start with Season 2. In the second season episode, The Ghost of General Lee, Roscoe thinks the Dukes drowned along with the General, so the Dukes pretend to be ghosts and ram Roscoe's patrol car. Now notice the General looks to have sustained some damage, even to the point of the hood popping open. But then in the next scene, the General pulls away without a scratch. Of course, I've always suspected the General was able to heal itself. Of course, we know that in real life, every time the General jumped, the Dodge Charger that played the General was dead. Even though, as far as we saw, the Dukes just drove on like nothing ever happened. And you wonder why 69 Dodge Chargers are so hard to find these days. If you're a big Dukes of Hazzard fan, like me, you've probably seen this jump a million times. I have to be honest, I never noticed this before until I read it on the IMDb. There's a camera attached to the General on your left. Thanks to that camera, we got this cool shot of the General in the air. In the second season episode, Hazzard Connection, something doesn't seem quite right when Bo punches the bad guy in this scene. It looks like the bad guy is reacting before Bo even gets anywhere near his face. Of course, maybe he was just squeamish. Yeah, I think the threat of Bo's mighty punch was just enough to scare the man into reacting way before the punch. That's what it was. I'm starting to think that Hazzard County is near the Bermuda Triangle. I mean, check out this time jump. See this fella running up to meet his girl? Well, here he is again pulling up in a car. The next explosive goof occurs on the episode The Runaway. Now this is the episode where the Duke boys run Daisy's Roadrunner right off a cliff. Now you know I always like that car better than the Jeep. Now as you can see, the Dukes are clearly alone in the car, which looks to be in the studio. Oh, before I continue on this one, quite a few of you all pointed out the last time I posted this on the Dukes Goose video that it looks like someone left a drinking cup on Daisy's hood towards the far right on the bottom. So I guess we should believe the Dukes were really driving real slow, or they superglued that cup to the hood. Now I always wondered, why do they ever shoot those outdoor scenes indoors on these TV shows? Well anyways, just as the Duke boys jump out of the vehicle, suddenly a mysterious figure pops out of nowhere. Now I sure hope he was a stuntman and knew what he was doing, because, you know, that car just goes right off the cliff and into a big fiery explosion. The next goof involves a car that changes models in the middle of a stunt. Now in this scene from the third season episode, Carnival of Thrills, we see Bo about to do a practice jump for a show he's joined. Now I'm not quite sure about the models of the car he's supposed to be driving, but according to IMDb, he starts his jump in a Plymouth Satellite. Then as he gets closer to the ramp, the car turns into a Plymouth Fury. And then once it lands, it becomes a Ford Grand Torino. As he's driving back, it morphs yet again. Now if you had a hard time telling that the car was changing, just keep your eyes on the front of the grill, rewind it, and look at it again. Now can you imagine if they switched to General Lee like that during the middle of a jump? I mean, what if it turned into a Mustang headed for the jump, and then in the air, God forbid, it turned into a Pinto before it hit the ground? It would have exploded into a fiery ball of, well, fire. I do have a theory, though. It could be that Bo had indeed made the first contact with alien life that we know as the Transformers. Now, in the third season episode, Mrs. Roscoe P. Coltrane, the Dukes get ran off the road by some crooks. And the General takes a lot of damage, but by the middle of the episode, the General appears to have healed itself. When the Dukes pull up to the farm, it looks perfect. Then it only looks beaten and battered again a few scenes later. Now we know the General can heal itself, but can it make itself look hurt on command as well? I just don't know. Let's go forward in time to season 5 in 1982. Now this is back when Bo and Luke left for just a little bit, and then Coy and Vance came in. How did Bo and Luke leave Hazzard County to join the NASCAR circuit when they were on parole?
You may not be on probation like your jailbird cousins are, but I tell you, a Duke's a Duke.
Now in the very first episode, the new Dukes have to take on a menace worthy of Knight Rider called the Mean Green Machine. In one scene, this tank-like vehicle, named after my favorite toy a few years earlier, that my sister took over, by the way. Anyways, this green machine plowed through Enos's patrol car and knocked it clear to the side. Now, in the real world, this would have bent the living, well, you know what, out of that police car. But the patrol car seems to have not been hit at all, as Enos and Cletus engage in hot pursuit. I found something a little off at the big final battle between the Dukes and the Green Machine. I noticed that the General Lee is chasing after the Green Machine. They're barreling down the road. Well, Coy and Vance come up with a plan, involving dynamite naturally. The Dukes come up with the idea of jumping over the Green Machine and dropping the dynamite on top of it. Now the stunt in itself is pretty awesome, but there is a little bit of a continuity problem here. See, I just happened to notice when the General Lee takes off, it's no longer on the road, it's on the dirt, and when it leaps up over the Green Machine, it appears like the Green Machine is not driving down the road anymore, it's completely standing still. So what happened? We went from chasing it down the road to suddenly it's completely still so that the General could easily jump over it and drop the dynamite on top of it. I shouldn't say easily. I mean, like I said before, this is a pretty awesome stunt. I mean, I wouldn't do it. Now, I don't know if it was just my imagination, but it seemed like in this season they were a little bit more careful about the camera angles to sort of prevent some of the indications of damage to the General Lee. But they were still there from time to time. Of course, we all know that the General Lee could heal itself. Like this episode where the General Lee actually healed itself as it went around the corner. That fast. See what I mean? Now in the intro to the series this year, it shows the Green Machine General Lee leap causing damage to the car, but then it's okay in the scene in the actual episode, which is probably just more proof the General can indeed heal itself rather quickly. Like in this scene, Roscoe may be pounding the General Lee to smithereens, but it won't matter because the General will be brand new in just a couple of seconds. You watch. Except now he's mad. In the episode Vance's Lady, Roscoe has a pretty close call. Well, closer than usual.
What a horrendous crash. Good.
This car accident was so close it chopped the top of Roscoe's hat off. Now how did Roscoe get the top of his hat cut like that when he was ducked down the whole time? This next goof comes from a funny Roscoe and Enos scene in the episode A Little Game of Pool. As Roscoe and Enos drive through the fence, check out the distance between the two cars. Now, if I didn't know any better, I'd think those two cars got a lot closer together, wouldn't you? Now, Roscoe and Enos don't know yet, but they have disturbed the home of a big old bull. Say, is this some kind of magic bull? How did he get between those two cars? Remember how close they were together? You know, I kind of have a feeling like Roscoe and Enos used stunt doubles for this particular scene. What do you think?
Move over, you're slowing me down. Oh, yeah? Yeah.
In the episode Coy vs. Vance, Coy is riding a motorcycle next to the General Lee. Now check out his front wheel, as it doesn't appear to be spinning at all. And yet, he is still keeping up with the General Lee. You know, in all the TV shows I've watched that had goofs, it seems like sometimes the best episodes are the ones with the most goofs. In this same episode, we had this amazing stunt. Now in the episode Welcome Back, Bo and Luke, it was the final episode of Christopher Mayer and Byron Cherry as Vance and Coy in the series. In all, they appeared in 19 episodes and 13 episodes of the cartoon version of the Dukes on Saturday morning. Now, as glad as I was back then to see Bo and Luke return, I have to say the biggest goof of all is how the show treated Vance and Coy. They left early in the return episode of Bo and Luke and were never seen again. They never even appeared on the reunion movies. I don't know if they were ever asked or not, of course, but you have to wonder. What a missed opportunity to have a major Dukes team up. To beat all, Coy and Vance were kicked off the cartoon series as well and replaced by, of course, Bo and Luke, Schneider, and Wopat. Now, Coy and Vance had the deck stacked against them, and I just think it would have been a decent thing to have given them a bit more of a send-off and a couple of return episodes, or at least let them keep the cartoon series since they started it. A viewer pointed this out to me in the comments. John Schneider is friends with Byron Cherry. Schneider actually had Byron Cherry on a few of his movies, Poker Run, Stand On It, and Christmas Cars, where he played Cousin Coy. This next scoop from the episode Daisy's Shotgun Wedding involves a hilarious fight scene between Bo Duke and future Night Court star Richard Mall, aka Bull. Mall's character, named Milo, and his family are trying to force Daisy to marry him, which leads the Duke boys, of course, to come in for a rescue from the air using hang gliders. Notice there's no sign of anybody around other than the family, the preacher, and the Duke boys. Well, Luke has his hands full while Bo is fighting Milo. Eventually, Luke does come to help him out. Did you happen to see the ghosts that apparently were watching? Keep your eyes to the right. I've slowed it down just a bit. Now, when I first saw these people, I about had a heart attack. There's probably a logical explanation as to who these people are or what they're doing, besides being ghosts. It's just that I guess I have a vivid imagination. Now let's go back to 1983 and check out the Dukes animated series. A fun spin-off of the live-action Dukes of Hazzard TV series that was a top 10 smash up until John Schneider and Tom Wopat went on strike, that is. The cartoon had a storyline that never ended, filled with a few mind-blowing goofs and mysteries no one ever bothered to solve, or at least attempt to explain on the show. The Duke boys and Daisy are on a race around the world to earn prize money to save the farm. And Boss Hogg and Roscoe are racing against them, so Boss can foreclose on the farm and win the prize money. But who is giving the prize money? There's no other racers, and there's no mention of exactly who is sponsoring the race. Was it just a bet between the Dukes and Boss Hogg? That can't be, really. I mean, the Dukes had no money. They needed the prize money just to save the farm. And then there's the mysterious disappearance of Coy and Vance Duke, voiced by the live-action TV Dukes at the time, Byron Cherry and Christopher Mayer. In 1983, when this cartoon came out, John Schneider and Tom Wopat were on strike for a bigger cut in all the profits the Dukes of Hazzard was generating. You know, all the toys, lunchboxes, posters, etc., etc. At any rate, Coy and Vance were the Dukes of the show at the time. Now, I hadn't seen this cartoon since I was a kid. I just recently bought the DVD set, and so I guess this was like the second time I watched it. The biggest laughs I got came from Boss and Roscoe, voiced by Sorrel Book and James Best. They brought the same hilarious fun they had on the live-action series to the cartoon, and then some.
The nerve of them Dukes sneaking up on us fair and square like that. Oh, hush!
What's your firecracker for, boss? It's the 4th of July, right?
It's the middle of the winter, you dipstick.
You know what you are? You're another Scrooge. You even sound like your name was Scrooge, and my name was Bob Scratchit.
You mean Bob Cratchit?
Him too.
But back to the Duke boys. They just up and disappeared in season 2 after Bo and Luke came back to the live-action series. At least on there, we had an explanation. We saw the old Dukes arrive in town, and Coy and Vance take off out of town. But in the cartoon, they were in the middle of a worldwide race. Right in the middle of it, and Coy and Vance just magically become Bo and Luke. I know they thought kids don't usually pay attention to plot details, but if two people magically become two other people, then kids notice. Believe me. I mean, I did. They could have said something, just some kind of explanation, but nope, nothing. To make matters worse, the start of the race is depicted in a new intro in the second season, and as the race starts, we see a sign that says, "Good luck to Bo, Luke, and Daisy." Did we start a new race? Is that the explanation? Then who won the last race? And if the Dukes won that race, the farm should be okay now, right? And if Boss won the last race, then Uncle Jesse would be homeless or paying extremely high rent to Boss. And as much fun as this show was at times, again mostly thanks to Roscoe and Boss Hogg, it would have been really nice to have an ending of some sort. But no, the race never ended officially. In fact, in one episode it looked like it might be getting near the end as they were released in America in the second to last episode when the Dukes were in Hollywood. But then they ended up in the Philippines on the last episode. Now, how do you drive from Hollywood to the Philippines anyway? You know, it ought to be a law for television. If you start a story, you have to end the story with one final episode. Well, at least the Dukes made me laugh. And the ending was less consequential because as the live action series was still on, as a kid you might automatically assume the Dukes won the race and kept the farm. But most series don't have another version of themselves to fall back on.
Jumpin' Jehoshaphat, it's a hornet's nest!
In the episode, Tales of the Vienna Hoods. Bo and Luke have replaced Coy and Vance, of course, in this season, but who keeps replacing them? Just in case you forgot, here's how they normally sound.
Let's make a break for it. You got it.
There's these strange voices coming out of Bo and Luke that aren't them.
I wonder what those fellas are looking for.
This episode was worse than the Super Friends for voice goofs.
Maybe my transmission's slipping.
You're right, Daisy. Who's gonna pay to see a band with fellas that old?
What do you think's going on?
Beats me, but we better get out of here.
So that's why those fellas were following us. They were after Cindy Sue. It'd be nice to go see some entertainment Saturday night. If them famous musician fellers is playing anywhere near town.
Gotta work our way back to General Lee, then light the heck on out of here.
Oh, I gotta warn you about the theme song. If you listen to it too much, it'll get stuck in your head and you'll never get it out. I mean never. And it plays in my head right now.
We're gonna have some Dukes!
Oh, Uncle Jesse, played by Denver Powell, was on the series as well. He was such a good actor. You can get the whole series on DVD at Amazon if you get the nostalgic bug and want to relive part of your childhood. Like I said, don't get too invested in the story, but, you know, you'll love Roscoe and Boss Hogg's antics. It's hilarious. And the stories, you know, individual stories are pretty interesting. It's just the fact that the main story, the race, that never concludes. I have to be honest though, I really did enjoy watching this series again. This series was fun, despite all the goofs and plot holes. It's always fun going back in time, I guess, reliving your childhood. And what's your hurry? Stay a while and check out my channel for all kinds of classic TV stuff, especially fun TV superhero shows from back when television was fun. If you like cartoons, check out my other family-friendly animated channel, Frady Cat Cartoons. On one of my latest videos, my cartoon cat Claw takes a visit to the Arca counter in Kentucky. If you've ever thought about visiting there, you might be interested in that one. Well, thanks for watching. Please comment. Let me know what you thought or what you'd like to see in the future. Please hit the like so YouTube will show this video to more people. Subscribe if you haven't, and have a great day.
Oh, goody, goody, go, Ralph.